This week is the week you've all been waiting for. It is the ultimate episode of How to Write Good. This week is my final rule for writing, if I'm not a robot. And that rule is write the book you want to read. My name is Daniel Poppy, and this is How to Write Good. Welcome to How to Write Good. My name is Daniel Poppy. You can find out more about me at danielpoppy.com. Poppy is spelled P-O-P-P-I-E, and you can slow that down if you like, if you want to check everything out. If you want to check me out on anything, you can go to Facebook, you can go to Twitter, you can go to Instagram. I am not good at responding to things on Facebook, so if you want to get in contact with me about something, I would go to Instagram first, because that's what I'm going to see first. Besides that, check out my serialized novel. It is called One Last Toast for Ebenezer Fleet. You can find it on this stream. You can also find it on its own stream if you don't want to listen to this specifically. Understandable. If you're not someone who wants to hear about writing and who just wants to... if you just want to be entertained, that's all right. Understandable. So check that out. You can also find it if you want to read it. So if you hate my voice as much as I hate my voice, you can check that out at my website, danielpoppy.com. And that's in the show description somewhere, whatever. All right, our word of the week is analogous. And there's actually two words of the week. So what analogous means is that it's something that is similar but not the exact same, right? So in a way, so if you make an analogy of something, you're comparing something else with it, and you're trying to make it, you're trying to explain it by using something similar that somebody else knows. This is actually a psychological principle. I don't know if you'd call it a principle, but it's a psychological idea. When people are learning things, they take something that they already know and they compare it to that thing. So when a little kid sees a horse and they've never seen a horse before, they might call it a dog because that's the closest match that they have. Or they might call it a big dog, which is really interesting. I use this word in a different sense. I use it in the same sense, but I use a different word. It's essentially the same word. We're just changing how it looks. I use it in the noun form, analog. And the best way whenever I think of the word analog, so analog is just something that is in place of another, or it's similar to something else. When I think of the word analog, I actually think of Mythbusters of all things, because when they tested things on what was supposed to be human flesh, there's this ballistics gel, and they use ballistics gel because it's similar to the composition of the human body. And they would make torsos that look like a person, of course, and they would test out different things on the ballistic gel. So that ballistic gel is an analog to the human body. That's a word I use fairly often. It's not a super complex word, but it is one that I think is fun to say, so I use it. The accidental essence this week, I am going to be talking about why you should write the book you want to read. And I've already tried to record this once or twice before, and honestly, this is a really simple rule, and I'm gonna try to get into some more reasons than the very specific reason why I think you should do this if you want to write a book. But it is applicable across different things. So write the book you want to read. Now, the main reason to do this is that when you look at writing a book, and people usually start out with, when they first decide they want to write a book, they want to write a book because they love writing. And I think that most people who end up writing for a career love writing enough to stick it out and turn it into a career. For example, if you're not a big fan of writing, or if you're not obsessed with it for whatever reason, because some people are obsessed with it, I would say that I'm obsessed with writing. If you want to classify me like that, I'm as close to obsessed as you can get, because I write every single day, and I'm at the point where I'm like, this is just what I do. But if you're not someone who's obsessed with writing, what is likely to happen, and this happens in a lot of different ways, but what is likely to happen is that you're like, man, I put a lot of time into this. I'm not really enjoying it. It's not something I feel called to do. It's not my purpose in life. It's not my passion. Therefore, I'm going to stop doing this at least as much as I have been. So I think a lot of people do that and that's fine. If you realize that you don't really like doing something and there is something you really love doing, you should try to do that thing you really love, because you're going to have more energy for everything else in your life as well. And it's likely that the thing you love, you're going to be able to devote more energy to, and you're going to be able to do that thing better. That isn't a hard and fast rule. So if you're someone who's like, well, I really, really like basketball and I'm 5 feet nothing, well, maybe you shouldn't do basketball as a career, because you almost always have to be about 7 feet tall, at least like 6'5", 7 feet tall. Some of those people are huge. They're freaks of nature, honestly. There's people, they are not the norm. Sports are a different sports, and I would say, well, artistic endeavors as well, but I think it's different. But when you look at any sport, there's a very small group of people who are actually making money off of that sport. And I would say that's the same in acting. There's a very small group of people who make money off of acting in Hollywood. Now, you may be able to make money off of acting in local theaters. That's a little different, but it's a smaller group. If you make music, actually, I think there's a much bigger market for it. If you write, I think there's a much bigger market for it. If you make visual art, I think there's an even bigger market for it, because you can do a lot of different things with digital art, and people are so visual these days, because people don't read as much. People do listen to music, though. That's the reason why I actually have a podcast, because people are much more likely to listen than they are to read. So if you really want to do something, do that thing, and you're probably going to have to support yourself when you do that thing. But when people approach writing, I think that this is the stage they go through. They love writing. This is their hobby. This is what they do. They find a lot of purpose in it for whatever reason. You have a really screwed up life, therefore you come to writing to try to fix your life or something like that, right? And you come to writing and you love writing, and then after a while you're like, man, I'd really like to do this for a job. And then let's just say you're the person who's like, this is my ideal situation. This is what I want to do for my life. I've actually heard a writer say that you kind of make a bet on your life if you're trying to go into the arts. If you're trying to go into writing or something like this, you're betting your life on this, and you're like, hey, I'm going to dedicate enough to make this work. But you go into it, and then after a while you start writing, and then you realize that you have to go through this long process to actually get published. And maybe you go my route and you do some self-publishing, and then at some point you realize, man, this is a really, really difficult thing to do, and I want to write this specific book. I want to write this specific type of book. This is what I love doing. But that book over there, that's making a lot more money. That book is making a lot more money. If you were looking at the 60s, the 70s, you'd be like, Westerns make a lot of money. And, you've got these spaghetti Westerns coming out. You've got these spaghetti Westerns coming out from Clint Eastwood and all these things. And these have made a lot of money in the past. So I'm going to go toward that. In more modern times, in the past 10, 15, 20 years even, people might look at young adult fiction. They might be like, young adult fiction sells really well. That has the potential to get really, really, really big. Other people might look at romance. Romance, I think, has a pretty big push, and there's a big market for it. I really think there's a big market for romance, or you might just pick a genre, whatever it is, and be like, hey, that genre seems to be doing well. Why don't I focus my time on that genre? Now, when you're writing, the issue comes with if you don't actually like that. If you love every type of writing, that's a little different. And I'm not opposed to finding a specific type of writing that you do, because if you write something and then you write something completely different, it's on. This is the J.K. Rowling trap. She wrote Harry Potter. That is the one thing she wrote, and it's a good thing she wrote 7, 8 books. I can't remember how many books are in the series, honestly. I don't care. She wrote 7 or 8 books, whatever it was, and she wrote other things related to Harry Potter. But the things that are the most successful that she wrote is that series, right? That is the J.K. Rowling trap. She wrote one specific series. She got really big for it. If she writes something else that's not related to the series, then people are like, I really don't care about this because I only am interested in Harry Potter. This would probably happen if Tolkien wrote something else. Most writers don't fall into this trap because most writers actually write a lot more books and a lot more things at the same time, and they don't get big off of one book. They slowly build. So if you want to niche up, if you're like, I really like writing romance, or if I really like writing sci-fi, or I really like writing this or that, I think it's perfectly fine to do that. I think that there's a lot of people who write different types of books, but they are themselves. So that book fits into who they are as a person. Therefore, the people reading it are going to like that book. So I think that's okay to pick a genre if you like that genre, or you're like, this is where I fit. For example, I fit in the science fiction kind of fantasy realm, and I cross over a little into the thriller. So, if I was going to pick someone who's going to read my book, I would say, hey, guys are probably going to like my books more than women. And if you look at different books that are similar to mine, I would say that if you get into, if you are a fantasy reader, you're going to like my book more than someone who is a romance reader, or even young adult fiction, I would say, to a certain degree, because it is written differently. It is from a specific perspective. So the issue comes when someone says that genre is the one that is making a lot of money, therefore I'm going to go over to that genre, and that's what I'm going to write. So I'm going to try to fit my ideas. I'm going to actually shift how I do things to fit into this specific genre. The issue comes with, what are you really interested in that? Right? Are you really interested in that genre? And it might be the case that you aren't. You're just like, there's money here, therefore I'm going to write it. If you are someone, like I said before, who you like that genre, you fit into it, it's something that you want to do it. But it comes down to this: if you the genre of what was I going to say, westerns, is not as big as it was in the past. It isn't something that is part of the western. It's a very American genre. The western in American literature is not something that is huge in the United States. But if you want to write a western, write a western. Now, there is a market for it. Okay, there's a market for westerns. There's a market for mysteries. If you want to write ghost stories, there's a market for ghost stories. If you want to write this or that, there's a market for those things. If you think about it, there are probably like 2 billion Anglophones, people who speak English in the world. At least there's probably more. And if someone can speak English and you're an English writer, then what you can do is you can write, and you don't have to get all 2 billion or however many English speakers there are in the world to read what you write. You only have to get a very small fraction of that 2 billion. So do you think that there are enough people, there's a big enough market out of 2 billion that they're going to read westerns? Right? Do you think that there's a big enough market that you are going to write like old sci-fi? People still read that old stuff. So there probably is a market for it. So if you're someone who's like, I shouldn't write this because there isn't a market for it, write that book. Because first off, you're going to be able to find people to read it. Second, if you're betting on another market, you don't know how trends are going to go. For example, if it takes you, if you're going the traditional publishing route, let's just say it takes you 2 years to, let's just say it takes you 2 years to write the book. It takes you 2 years to write the book. Then after you write the book, it takes you a year to get an agent, and it takes you another year to fully get published. There are 4 years right there. How do you know that if you love writing westerns, right? How do you know that there's not going to be this big cultural shift wherever you live, or there's not going to be a big cultural shift somewhere in the world where people just start loving that genre? If you know the band The Killers, they actually didn't get big in the United States. They got big somewhere else. And you cannot take the temperature of the whole entire world. You can't take the temperature of every single subculture in the world. You can't take the temperature of every neighborhood. You don't know what's going on in every neighborhood. So what I'm saying is that from a market perspective, just write the book that you want to read. And what some people think is like, they think, well, there's these other books out there, and these other books fit into this specific idea, and people really don't want to read what I have to write. People really don't want to read my ideas. What I've noticed is that people who write tend to be really critical of themselves. And I think that's a good thing. I've said that in the past. I think it's a good thing. They tend to be really critical of themselves. Like my last rule, write a crappy first draft. Enjoy writing that first draft. Just go bananas. Do whatever you want with that first draft. Put whatever you want in. Your critical self is going to get really critical when you go back to it and you edit it. You're going to get critical when you go back to it and edit it. But do not worry, because you what people, it seems to be the case that people who are writers are introverts. I'm an introvert. I don't typically like going out and talking to random people. It's something that I think all writers should learn how to do. I think that if you are a writer, you should just learn how to talk to random people all the time. You should develop that ability to talk to people. You should develop that ability to have a conversation that gets going so you can get to know them. And if they know you, maybe they're going to read your book, maybe they're going to like it, but it's still good for you, because writing is really trying to understand reality, trying to understand how we relate to reality, but trying to also understand other people's perspectives. And we're trying to put those perspectives and that reality down on paper. We're trying to reflect reality. So if you can talk to more people, you get kind of a bigger picture, a better picture, a clearer picture of reality. So I think that, side note, but you should try to be talking to people. But we tend to be introverts, I think. I think it's typically the case that we tend to be introverts. That's why instead of talking to other people, we just write crap down, right? And what we think is okay, I think a lot, I do this, I do that, but there's not, what I think and what I like isn't what other people think and what other people like. Well, this is a bunch of crap. This is complete crap. Just think about the logic of this. Think about what you enjoy. Think about the books you like. Think about the movies you like. Think about the television shows you like, or whatever, the music you like. Does that television show, does that music, do those people make at least a little money off of that music, right? Do those people have fans? And if you look at that, and what you look and what you see is you're like, yeah, those people actually do have fans. Now, you could chalk it up to those people in that area being extremely good, right? Those people in that area having a huge marketing push. Maybe they're just lucky. Honestly, if you think that everybody is lucky who has made it in a creative field, I think that you are lying to yourself. There are certainly people who have gotten lucky, who suddenly become famous, or they become really successful, right? For whatever reason, they have a huge push, and they get huge. They get massive, which isn't the case with most people. But I would say that you aren't seeing the whole picture. You aren't seeing that there's tons of work that's been put into what these people are doing, and they've gotten to where they are because they put in tons of work. I think that we tend to say, oh, these people, they just got famous because they met a specific person. It might be the case in some cases, but is every single person who writes, every single person who makes money off of writing, is that really the case? Or do they just keep on chipping away at it? But going back to it, you like specific things. There's specific things you like about the music you listen to. There's specific things you like about the art you like, right? There's a specific reason you like that. There's a specific reason you watch specific TV shows or watch specific movies, even though movies, in my opinion, are not as good as TV shows these days. But there's a specific reason you do that. So when you are writing, there is a reason why if you actually like how you are writing, there is a reason why you like how you are writing. And if there are 2 billion English speakers in the world, is it really likely that no one is going to like your writing? Okay. Is there a chance? Yes. How big is that chance? It's probably not that big. You don't have to have this unbelievable ability to write. And I've said this in the past too. You do not have to be the best writer in the world to be the most successful writer in the world. I have seen so many writers who are either it's happened more I can't assess really old writing, because really old writing is a different type of writing. It's a different type of speaking. It's a different type of thinking than what we do now. But I can look back 50 years and I can look at writing and I can assess whether the writing is good. And there are certainly the writing is clear that comes out of those eras, but it is not phenomenal writing. It is not writing that you are amazed with. It's not writing that you're like, this blows my mind. There's a few authors who are able to do that, but most authors are not these unbelievable writers. They are clear. They're clear enough to write things. So you don't need this unbelievable ability to write. If you are terrible at writing, just keep on writing and develop that ability to actually have clarity and be able to put 3 words together, But you don't need to be an unbelievable poet. You do not need to be. So there are specific filmmakers who are tremendous filmmakers, I would say, or they put together things really well and they do a really good job. these filmmakers can do whatever they want. One of these filmmakers, I would say, and you can disagree with me, of course, is Christopher Nolan. Even if you don't like his stuff, he's able to control his movies, and he has a director's vision where he can put things together where it all fits well. Okay, if I want to say that, if I can say that, everything fits together well, and he does things that are unique. Now he is kind of like the really, really good writer. So you read his stuff and you're like, oh my gosh. When you watch his stuff, most people are like, man, that was really good. I really, really enjoyed that movie because it was put together. It was a very high production value, but it also had a great story. It was directed really well, and it kind of hit you. It had a specific pacing. It had specific things in the movie that really hit you hard. So most people are like, wow, he does a really good job when he makes movies. Now, you don't have to be him. There's a lot of other directors who are not unbelievable directors. There's a lot of... The thing about growing up, the thing about becoming an adult, and if you're not an adult yet and you have to be listening to this, that's fine. I don't know why you think it's interesting, but thanks for listening. The thing about becoming an adult is that you realize that people don't actually do things perfectly. When you see a movie as a kid, you don't see all the errors. When I did as a kid, I didn't see as many errors. But when I watch movies as an adult, I say, "Oh my gosh, there's so many things that should have been changed in this." And you realize that people are just muddling through a lot of things, and people are trying to figure things out, and people haven't become excellent at what they do, or they haven't become completely excellent at what they do. They are just still trying to learn. They're still trying to do something and make something better. And I think that you need to realize that. You need to realize that, hey, there is a reason why you like your own writing. There is a reason why you like your own writing, and it's likely that other people are going to like it for that same reason. Or maybe they're going to like it for another reason completely. The biggest reason, this is the final reason I'm going to talk about. So that's why I think that you should actually write the book from like a marketing perspective, because there are going to be people who like what you write, likely like what you write. You know, if you're a terrible writer, I'm sorry, just work on your writing. There are going to be people who are better than other people at writing, but people are going to like what you write, and the genre you pick or the type of writing you pick is going to have an audience. It's just hard to find that audience in some cases. In some cases, the people who are marketing, the publishing houses, I think that if they see something, they're like, well, can I make money off of this? And they don't see a market for it. They're like, maybe I can't. But and I'll get to my final reason, but I've got one more thing to say. If you look back at history, it used to be the case that I believe IBM, or it was Xerox, I can't remember. There was the computer giant, the person who made processors in computers. And what happened is you had these smaller personal computer companies. And the big, huge company that made computers, and I'm sorry I can't remember who it was, what they said is, nobody's going to ever want a computer in their house. And you had these companies, and we know them now because they're the biggest companies, some of the biggest companies in the world, in the United States. They have a lot of power, they have a lot of money. It made some of the richest people in the world, Apple and Microsoft. And they said, we think, and I think that this was more due to Apple way back when, but they're like, we think that we can there's a market for having computers in people's houses. We think people are going to want to have computers in their houses. So what they did is they started creating computers, and like I said, I think Apple started this, so I'll give them the credit. They started creating computers that people could put in their houses, and they started a trend, and then they created the home computer business. They created a market for it. So even if you think, man, there's no market for this, and there's no publishing house is ever going to pick this up because there's no market, maybe you have to be a little bit visionary. Maybe you have to think, there's no market that I see for this, but people want this. If you can assess what people want, if you're like, I think people want this, I'm going to take a risk. And it is a risk because maybe people won't want it. And then you have to go back and you have to start it. But, if you're writing something good, if it's meeting that threshold of the ability to write, then you're probably going to be fine. And you have to do the work to actually get it out to the people who want it. You have to find that market for it. And eventually then, as you build up, maybe it'll take 10 years. Eventually you're going to actually see a lot of movement on that. I think if you're actually putting in the time, you're actually putting in the effort. There is, for example, the movie The Room, which is very popular nowadays. The Room is not a well acted, it's not a well put together movie, but there is a cult a cult following of the room because of that, and which is great, which I think is awesome. If you look, there's a specific band, and a friend of mine and I like to joke about it. It's called The Birthday Party, and they were from the 70s, and they were doing screamo before screamo existed. In a way, you should check them out. And they are a very bizarre band, and they didn't make it in the mainstream, but they put out records. And the reason they put out records is somebody was saying, you're doing something different, and I kind of like it. They didn't ever get big, but they were doing something different, and they were able to at least have a few albums, which is saying something, right? All right. So the final reason that I think that you should write the book you want to write, the book you want to read, write the book you want to read, is that you have a specific, unique perspective on the world. If you think, hey, I'm not rich enough, if you think I'm not intelligent enough, if you think, hey, I don't have this specific personality trait, or I don't have that specific personality trait. Unique books are made by unique people, right? If everybody had the same exact experiences, we'd have books that are churned out that are pretty much the exact same thing. If you have a really big difficulty in your life, if you have something in your life that gets in the way, that is actually prime. That's prime. The earth is ripe. I can't think of the word right now. The earth is fertile. That is a fertile idea for creating a book, for writing a book. And maybe you don't want to write about that specifically, but you can always make something into a metaphor and change it, right? You don't have to write about your specific experiences. You don't have to write a memoir, but you can take things from your personal experiences and you can put them into your books. You can put them into your writing without explicitly stating what your personal experience is. You change it into something else. Here's something else. I think fairly often, man, I'm not this really straightforward thinker. I have a lot of thoughts all at once, and they all spin around. And when I'm writing, it feels amazing because for whatever reason, what I'm doing and the writing I'm doing fits with that. When I'm writing, I'm taking all these different types of ideas and I'm bringing them together, and it's just kind of working. It's working together, and I really, really like it. But in other cases, I run into the situation where I'm doing work and my mind is split. I have more than one thing going on, and I can't focus on this one specific thing because it's not engaging my mind in the same way as writing. Okay, so there's something in me that doesn't make me the perfect candidate for every single job. It doesn't make me the best. If I picked a certain career, it wouldn't make me really good at that career, but it allows me to write in a specific way that I really enjoy, so I fit into that, okay? And what I like to say to you is you don't necessarily have to write the same way I do, right? You don't have to approach writing in the same way I do because you're a unique person. But there are specific things in your life that make you unique that may give you a specific type of writing that is great, that is beautiful. It may allow you to write stories in a way that other people aren't. And I think that the whole point of this podcast episode is to say that do not just copy what everybody else is doing. Look at the specific talents, look at the specific experiences, look at the specific difficulties even, look at the specific things that you have gone through in your life that you can bring together the way you work to create a new type of writing. I would say that if you look at writing that is classic writing, and I'm not going to say that I'm going to be a person who ever falls into a classic writer's position, but those books that are classics, they aren't always... they stand out, right? They are a specific thing that somebody wrote, and they are unique. So that's what I want to put that out there for. And I don't know. I think that you do have something to offer, and it may not be in the writing field. Maybe you find that this isn't the best place for you, and that's all right. But I think that if you want to do something creative, there is a place where you can find where you're like, yeah, this is where I really excel and I'm able to do that creative stuff. All right, our logical fallacy of the week is one we've already had, because I've already run out of logical fallacies. And I do not want to explain formal argumentation because it'll take too long, so I'm going back to informal fallacies. I'm going to remind you again of the argument to moderation. And the argument to moderation, if you cannot remember, and maybe after like 7 times of going over the argument to moderation, you'll remember it. But the argument to moderation is that if you argue to the center of an issue, then that is correct. That's not necessarily true, right? If I say, if there's someone who says that you shouldn't kill innocent people, and there's someone who says that we should kill people as long as it's convenient, well, finding a middle ground and saying, okay, there's certain situations where we should kill people, and there's certain situations where we shouldn't kill people, or even finding a middle ground where you're like, okay, we can harm the innocent, but we can't kill them. That's probably an issue, right? That's not correct. I would say that the majority of people are going to say, we should not harm the innocent because they're the innocent. We shouldn't kill the innocent. We shouldn't harm the innocent. They shouldn't be hurt at all because they're the innocent. And that's an extreme example, and that's a bizarre example. But it points out that just because you're arguing to the middle, it doesn't mean that it's true. It may be the case that the middle ground is the truth, but it's not necessarily the case that the middle ground is the truth. What is the truth is the truth. What is a good argument is a good argument. I think that we have a tendency in the United States, and probably in politics in general, politics is notorious for this. It's always the case in politics that people are like, let's find the middle ground. Well, what if someone is committing atrocities, and the middle ground is, so one person's committing atrocities, and one person isn't at all, and they actually have the truth. They are actually saying, hey, this is good, and this is what we should do. Well, arguing to the middle is not doing any good. I would say that if somebody's saying, oh, we should be able to have slavery, and we should be able to have slavery without limits, that's bad. And everybody agrees with that. And then there's someone saying, we should completely get rid of slavery. This is awful. Well, if you argue to the middle and you get to some type of indentured servitude, and it's pretty much like these people are slaves for a certain amount of time to people, well, you're arguing to the middle, but you're not getting to the truth. You're not getting to what actually is good. That's what I've got for you this week. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support me more, what I would ask you to do is that you go to iTunes and you leave a 5-star review. That is something that really, really helps me and helps push the podcast out to different people. And it's something that doesn't cost you much time at all. So if you would do that, I would really appreciate that. And I definitely appreciate everyone who listens to this podcast. If you ever listen to this podcast and you have questions or you have topics you would like me to cover, you can send those to me and I'll look them over and I'll see which ones I think I can cover intelligently. And if you just want to reach out for anything at all, you can do that as well. Thanks for your time. My name is Daniel Poppy, and as always, this is How to Write Good.